Hey, I'm Giga, and as you probably saw in the title, today we're making ramen. Soul-warming, delicious umami ramen to help us with our cold and rainy days of Lisbon. And since we're making Japanese food, I had to go to the Asian grocery store to get a bunch of goodies. And I'll explain what all these things are once we get to use them, but you can generally find them around your local Chinatown if you have one. In Lisbon, that's basically around Martin Beach. While I'm a pro at eating ramen, trust me, I'm the best at it. I have no idea how to start to achieve that umami, savoriness, and incredible depth of flavor that a good ramen broth has. As well as to how to even make those noodles, because they have such a unique texture and bounce to them. So I started with some research and I immediately learned something. Ramen has a lot more components than I thought. And if you think you can name all of the components that go into a ramen bowl, put them in the comments before I tell you. Generally, a ramen bowl has 5 components. 3 of them are pretty basic. The 4th, I think a lot of people also get it. So the first 3 are the broth, the noodles, and the toppings, like it could be pork or a soft-boiled egg or some nori seaweed. The 4th, that some people I think would guess, is oil. It could be like a chili oil or like sesame oil if you want to be like the most basic, or like I saw a black garlic oil, which I think I will try to make because it sounded super interesting. And the 5th one, which is something I had never heard of, is something called Tare, which is the seasoning of the whole ramen bowl. But out of those 5 components, one of them takes a lot longer to make than the rest of them. So we're gonna start with that one, the broth. There are plenty of ramen broths around, but from the ones I've eaten, my favorite has always been tonkatsu. So that's the one we're gonna do today. Tonkatsu is basically pork bones broth, so I'm putting into a pot a bunch of pig's feet and a few chicken carcasses to boil for a couple minutes. While that's going, we peel and roughly chop some onions, some leek, ginger, and some mushrooms. Once everything is boiled, we wash out the bones to remove any blood clots or anything dark and put everything into a pot along with some chicken feet to boil again. I saw online that the crock pot doesn't really work for tonkatsu because it doesn't get hot enough and you need that boiling temperature to emulsify the fat. But I don't want to leave my stove on during the night, and honestly, who trusts what you read online? So we're gonna do it this way and we'll see what happens. While that cooks, we can work on a separate part of the broth that I also didn't know existed, which is called dashi. So dashi is a separate broth that acts as a base and enhances all of the umami flavors. It can be made out of various things that have some weird chemical compound that intensifies the umami flavor, but the most famous combo is using kombu seaweed. I feel like I'm a rapper. Compound, combo, kombu. And bonito flakes, which is a dry tuna from Japan. I couldn't find the flakes, so I decided to do just a kombu dashi. You just put them in some water. And now we let these soak for a few hours and we can move on to the noodles. Nope, not the noodles. That sounds too hard right now. Let's postpone that and let's move on to the tare. Let's do the tare. Similarly to broth, there are many types of tare. But the one that caught my eye was called shoyu, which is based on soy sauce. So into a saucepan you add a little bit of chicken stock, some mirin, which is a slightly sweet rice wine that's used in a lot of Japanese cooking, some soy sauce, sake, sugar, rice wine vinegar, and then some garlic, ginger, and a scallion. Then you turn the heat on and simmer it until it reduces by about 2/3. Strain it into a container, and there you have it, delicious tare. What I also learned in my research yesterday was that what makes ramen noodles special is that chew and that flavor comes from the fact that they're made with a very high gluten flour and an alkaline mixture. So in order to make it alkaline, we need to start by doing something a little funky, which is bake baking soda. Let's do it. Baking soda by itself, it's already alkaline, or basic, but it's still very close to 7. So by baking it, we turn it into sodium carbonate, which is more basic than pumpkin spice lattes. I can't even say this with a straight face. We just put it in the oven at a low temp for about an hour, and we know it's done when it lost about 1/3 of its weight. Then we mix it with some water and salt and add it into a bowl with flour and wheat gluten until it forms a shaggy dough. Once the dough looks good, pour it on a table and bring everything together. We're gonna let it rest now, so I split it into 3 parts to make my stretching process later a little easier. I got distracted doing something else, so I had to come finish this at night. But let me tell you, this dough is tough. Must be all that gluten, because I was putting all of my weight on it and it still barely even budged. My hands were not happy about it, so I had to figure out another way. That's so much better. And after the dough is rested another time, we go for the final stretch. This part we gotta do by hand, but let me tell you, it's hard as hell. This dough does not want to stretch. Once we get it into about 1.5 millimeters, we fold it on itself and cut it into thin noodles. Then unfold them and try and fail to make a little noodle nest. Well, that's good enough. Now repeat with all the other sheets of dough, because I'm making ramen for 4. I'm exhausted, it's late, this is loads of work, but I'm kind of proud of them. Look at my noodles, they look good. Look. Let's see how they taste tomorrow. My hands are sore. They hurt from stretching the noodles yesterday. But we're almost at the finish line. We only need to do the flavoring oil and then the toppings. So let's give it a hand at that black garlic oil that I saw online, because it sounded delicious. Let's go. This part is pretty straightforward. Just peel and dice a bunch of garlic and put it in a saucepan with some oil. The interweb said canola or vegetable oil. Now you're gonna keep stirring it on medium heat until it starts browning. Then lower the heat to the minimum you can and keep stirring until the garlic turns black. And yes, you heard it right, not brown, black. Now add some sesame oil, bzzz the whole thing up, and done. I'm gonna be honest, this stuff smells a little weird, but maybe it tastes amazing in the broth. But now let's go for the last thing missing, the toppings. There's basically 2 toppings we gotta take care of. Soft-boiled eggs and the meat. Let's start with the eggs. Into a pot of boiling water, we gently lower refrigerator cold eggs. Boil them for around 6.5 minutes and then put them in some ice water to stop the cooking. We remove their shells and should be golden, but let's try one to see. Nice! And since we don't waste food in my kitchen, we gotta put some salt and pepper on it, and we got ourselves a snack. Over the rest of the eggs, we pour some soy, mirin, and water and let them marinate in the fridge. For the meat, we're gonna try and make chashu pork, or at least I think that's how you say it. So in a pan with a little bit of oil, we're gonna make sure to sear all of the sides of our pork belly to get all of those delicious brown bits. Then once everything is seared, in a pot with soy sauce, we add mirin, water, and sugar. And then add our meat and immediately realized that the pot was way too small and we needed to move everything into a bigger one. Finally, add some ginger and green onions and bring everything into a boil. Lower the heat and cover with a drop lid, which I'm not exactly sure what it does, but the recipe I saw called for it, and since I like arts and crafts, I tried making one. Now, for the next hour or so, we're gonna turn the meat every 15 minutes until it's cooked all the way through and sucked up all of those delicious flavors. Once everything is cooked, we just uncover it and let the sauce reduce down until it's nice, glossy, and thick. Then move the meat into our cutting board and serve up some nice thick slices. If any pieces come apart, make sure to taste them, because they're so good. This ramen came out so good! Just the whole bowl was incredible. And it's just amazing how adding the tare in the beginning to the broth makes such a difference. And don't even get me started on the black garlic oil. That stuff is weird. Like, I tried tasting it before I put it into anything, and it straight up just tastes like a bonfire. But then you add it with the broth, and it just adds this complexity of flavor that is strange, but also good, and makes you want to keep eating it more, or drinking it, I guess, the broth. Then for the broth itself, I know it's not exactly the traditional creamy tonkatsu that you'd expect, but it just tasted incredible. It didn't look exactly the part, but it just tasted great. Now, the noodles is where I think things change a little bit. I don't think I would do them again until I have like a pasta rolling machine or something. My hands are still sore and they still hurt from rolling them by hand. But don't get me wrong, they tasted great, they had a nice consistency, even though they were cut a little weird. But let's move on to the meat. I could eat that whole block of pork belly by myself, it was so good. Like, it was mouth-watering good just looking at it. Like, I'm thinking about it and oh, that was so good. It's like dessert, but then you put it in a ramen bowl, it makes no sense. Soft-boiled eggs are life in general, they're so good. But these marinated ones with soy and mirin were just another level. We had a few more extra toppings, like some nori, some mushrooms, a little bamboo, and some scallions, and we're good to go. We got a hot, steamy bowl of ramen. Delicious. If you have any comments on how I can improve my ramen game, please put them down below, along with suggestions for other foods I can make for the next episode of World Food. But now, just remember to subscribe to the channel and stay weird. Bye!